Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock in the morning here, Monday morning, April 5th. I'm happy to be here. This is one child abuse survivor to another, and we're on for half an hour. I did change the time and the length of the show from 5:30 and a 15-minute show to 6 o'clock to a half an hour show. And this gives me a little bit more time to wake up and have some coffee and stuff before I start talking. So, I'm glad to be here, and we're on for 30 minutes. And we're looking at, I want to continue on with Understanding Crisis, an article that I found on Child Welfare Information Gateway at www.childwelfare.gov. And this article is really interesting, especially to me, because there was an intervention done in our family many, many years ago when I was just a baby. But I remember some social workers coming with the clipboards and having for them to check for abuse, so I had to remove my clothing. And so I think it's kind of interesting to sort of look at it. No one in my family talks about it, and my family really is dysfunctionally functional, Like we function, but in a dysfunctional state, but we've always done that, so there's really nothing different there. So no one really wants to talk about this stuff. My sister remembers a little bit about it, not too much, and she was young as well. And my other siblings are gone who would have actually known about it and who would have been able to talk about it with me. So they've already passed on, and so there's really no one to really get this information from. It was so long ago. So I just kind of find this interesting to see what best case scenario would have been in this in a situation where, CPS or DHS, any of the child protection agencies would go into a home. What's the best case scenario if there is abuse reported? And so this article is quite interesting because it does give the best case scenario of what should happen when CPS or any of the other, child protection agencies go into a home when there's abuse reported. And so you can find this article by looking. It's a publication on the Child Welfare Information Gateway. And they have lots of great information there. And you can scroll through their publications, and you can bring them up alphabetically. That's how I found this one, looking under the letter C, probably looking for child abuse or something, and scrolled down all the way to crisis. And this one came up on Understanding Crisis. And so I thought we'd just take a look at it. We've been on it for a couple of weeks now. There was really quite a lot of information, and we're just finishing up with it, actually. We were looking at last week special family situations, like if there's marital problems, if the parents are using drugs, if there is mental health issues and things like that, different things that actually contribute to abuse in a home or can. And so those are special family circumstances that the CPS workers, the crisis workers, have to look at when they go in. So that's what we're looking at. It's not a professional show. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or therapist certificates. It's not meant to replace professional help. You have to listen at your own discretion. I cover all topics of abuse and domestic violence and whatnot, and it can be rather uncomfortable for a lot of people listening to it. So if you're uncomfortable, you have to make your own decision and decide whether or not you want to listen to it, because we all want to be comfortable, right? So if it does bother you, please turn it off. You won't be hurting my feelings at all. I've lived with abuse for over 40 years, so I know what it's all about, and I know I've been dealing with it on a daily basis, so whether it's by myself or with other people, so I'm okay talking about it, but a lot of people just have a hard time with it. So if it does bother you, please turn the show off. And young people, I really suggest, people under the age of 18, just because of online safety issues, that you would have an adult listen to the show with you, because it's so important, right? Your safety is number one. We cannot undermine the issue of child online safety. There's a lot of crazy people out there, child sexual predators and whatnot, that pose as other people. They'll do whatever they can, manipulative, wise, to try to get a hold of children. So it's my suggestion that you would let people know, an adult know, someone who's older know, what you're doing online, whether you're talking to people online in chat rooms or whether you're meeting up with people that you meet online, things like that. Children are dying every day at the hands of caregivers and also at the hands of child sexual predators. And this could be avoided, really, with the child sexual predators. If you do not make yourself available to them, they cannot get a hold of you. So you need to stay safe, and you need to find out how to do that, right? Excuse me. We're going to have I'm going to be doing a show on that pretty soon, maybe in a week or so, or less. Maybe this week, later on this week, because we're going to talk about child online safety, because I see too many reports now in the paper where children are actually being killed by child sexual predators, and how they got a hold of them online, through online contact. And so it is so important that you have someone listen to this show with you, just to make sure that it's something that you should be listening to. And also because the subject of abuse is really kind of scary, and especially for young people, if they haven't heard too much about it. If you haven't heard too much about it, it could be kind of confusing, and you might wonder why and have questions and kind of wonder what I'm talking about, and because abuse is not talked about very much, right? So you could have someone help you to find the answers, and that's why, I really suggest that people have, young people have someone listen to this with you, so that you can get answers to the questions that you might have, right, regarding the topics that I'm talking about. So that's why. And but ultimately, the show is about children. It's about child abuse, and that we need to stop child abuse, right? I have another program on in the evenings. It's called Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us, and it's also a half-an-hour program. And I just pick and kind of choose which topics to talk about. Really, I'm trying to cover the whole array and gamut of issues surrounding child abuse and human rights abuses, and mostly like things like child abuse, domestic violence, and whatnot, sexual abuse and stuff, and sexual assault. But there's so much information out there, and I'm just one person. I just thought I'd just add my voice to it, so that's why I'm doing the Blog Talk Radio. And I'm a part-time student at MRU, and I just, in between courses, I couldn't afford to go, and I lost my job, and my job was just sort of redundant. It just wasn't needed anymore. So I lost my job, and I couldn't afford to go. Now I got my job back, but the thing is I haven't had time to save, really haven't saved any money towards these courses, so I'd like to continue on studying child rights and human rights and international community development, but that's hopefully later this fall. That's what I'm hoping on. So in between now and then, I thought, hey, I'll just do a Blog Talk Radio show. So that's how this came about. And, I was listening to another Blog Talk Radio show, and Gail Crabtree's Voices of Hope, which is on Blog Talk Radio, and it's such a great show. And I was listening to her, and I clicked on the button, Create Your Own Show, and that's how this came about. I just sort of ended up with a show, and I was doing like one show a week, and it developed into 2 shows a week, and then pretty soon, before you know it, it was like 10 shows a week. So, but I thought, hey, while I'm paying to do this show, I have to pay to do this show. I thought, if I'm going to pitch out money to do a show, I don't want to do one show a week. I want to do something on a regular basis, just to get as many shows done as I can regarding child abuse, because it's really just, we have to start talking about it if we're ever going to make a difference in stopping child abuse and preventing child abuse. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, volunteer position, and let me tell you, I'm so happy to stand with them and just to get the word out that we really have to find the answers to this epidemic of child abuse. It's worldwide. We know that. It's actually worse in other countries because they're actually allowed to abuse their children. They're actually allowed to kill their children without any recourse. So in our countries, in North America, it's a lot better because we have laws and stuff in place, even though it's not perfect. It's not a perfect system. And will it ever be perfect? No, because people aren't perfect. But the thing is we have to make changes to make sure that the legislation and the laws change to benefit children instead of the abusers, first of all. And we need to, have a better system as far as like child protection. But I'm happy to see that there are like CPS and DHS out there. I'm not against them. I'm actually for them, because our family was not removed. My siblings and I were not removed from the home, and so we stayed in a home that was full of abuse, and we were just treated so terribly, really our whole entire lives, and made subjected to my parents' domestic violence and BS, and so it had its effect on our family and really destroyed us. I really think had they removed us from the home, put us somewhere for a while until my parents actually got help and proved that they had gotten help, got their marriage straightened out and situated, and their own personal problems. My dad was borderline schizophrenic. He needed help. My mom was manic depressive. She needed help. And the two of them should have gotten help first, and then we could have all come back together as a family and had family counseling, and I think we would have been all right. But that didn't happen. We were not removed from the home. So, I feel like, if a child's being abused and there is abuse in the home, really parents, if the parents aren't going to straighten up and do what they're supposed to, then I totally believe that the children should be removed, absolutely, because you could save a child's life. I mean, I could have been killed. My mother bashed my head in a couple times, actually broke my head open, and My other brother committed suicide just from the abuse that he suffered. Another brother died of a drug overdose because he could not cope, and he was doing drugs from a young age. And it was just terrible. Our family really slipped through the cracks when my parents left the country. They were supposed to go to counseling, right? They went to 2 sessions and then left the country. Took all of us with them. And so we sort of got out of the whole eye of the social system down there, right? And then we just fell through the cracks. So there you go. So you don't want children falling through the cracks. We need to make changes to make sure that children don't fall through the cracks. If there's abuse reported, there has to be better ways of looking at it, better ways of making sure that the parents or caregivers are going to do what they're supposed to do by law, which is to get counseling or get help, And these children really need more. They need someone else looking in on them instead of just a couple of visits from a CPS worker. But the thing is it's not a perfect system, and we really have a lot of work to do. And that's my goal, is to get seriously involved in changing the laws and changing the way the society thinks about abuse, get it out into the main public eye. People need to start talking about it. Kids are dying on a daily basis at the hands of their parents and caregivers, and if they're not dying, they're just in a hospital with abuse-related injuries, see? So the whole issue is just so incredibly huge. But if we don't do it, who's going to do it? If this generation, of my peers and my people in my generation aren't going to stand up and do this, well, who's going to do it? You know what I mean? So we have to really. There are people that set the stage for us, thank God, and it's up to us to carry it. Those people can't carry it forever. So these people that were working, the last 20 years or so to try to make some changes, in the last 30 years even, they have set the groundwork for us, and now we have to continue it on, and we have to really find ways to protect children from abuse, and we just have to keep going. So I hope that somebody will hear this show and decide that that's what they're going to do, make some noise about child abuse and get it out into the open, into the public eye, right? We all have to be a voice for these children, and it's up to us to actually do something to try to save their lives, because obviously their parents aren't going to. They're going to try to kill them. So sadly enough, right? So, and family members often turn a blind eye. My family completely turned a blind eye to the abuse that my mother was inflicting upon me. So, family members do not always step in when they should. They really were feeling more sorry for my mother, who was depressed, than they were for me, who was being beaten and abused in just about every way. So, there you go. They felt more sympathy for the abuser than they did for the abused, and that can happen, right? So we have to make these changes, right? We really do. Kids are counting on us, and they will continue to die if we don't make these changes. It's really on our hands. It's actually the blood is on our hands. We have to make something happen, and the only way it's going to happen is education, awareness, prevention of child abuse, and it's going to have to be front and center on the front page every day of the newspaper and on the news to actually make this happen. So I wish everybody would raise their voices in whatever way they can, right? Whatever resources they have. People are limited in resources. But as far as just being a voice, if you have a voice and you can speak, then start speaking out against abuse, and especially child abuse. So hugely important. So we'll get on with this article, Crisis Intervention Assessment. We were looking at it Friday morning, and they had this one section called Total Family Involvement. And they said, I'll just read through there again because we had sort of left off there, and there was an assessment part, making the initial contact and whatnot. But total family involvement, since families are systems, what affects one member of a family affects other members. Considering this dynamic interactional pattern, it makes sense to involve the entire family in crisis intervention assessment. This is especially true of child abuse and neglect cases, where the interactional pattern is dysfunctional and change is critical to protecting the child. Even in incest cases or illegal drug sales in which the offender is removed but reunification may occur, intervention is done with remaining family members but coordinated with professionals who are treating the offender. And it says, for an intervention to be most effective, all family members require both individual and group attention. Each member needs to feel special and separate, yet an integral part of the family group. And individual and family value orientations, communication styles, and roles must be understood. It takes hours of listening for the crisis worker to understand implicit family rules and beliefs, how messages are communicated and received, and who relates to whom and how within the family. All family members need the opportunity to give their opinions about the family's primary problems. Different opinions help the crisis worker get a picture of the antecedents to the crisis, and the involvement of the total family may facilitate the following intervention. It says, when family crisis intervention is implemented, the specific steps that follow, similar to the generic stages of individual or group crisis counseling, should be taken. Appropriate efforts should be made to involve family members in each phase, which are 1, to search for the precipitating event and its perceptual meaning to the family members. So, like, what actually happened to the actual event that caused CPS to get involved, the abuse, right? Number 2, look for the coping means used by the family and appraise the extent to which these have or have not been successful. Number 3, search for alternative ways of coping and the resources that might improve the situation while actively soliciting suggestions from family members. Number 4, review and support the family members' efforts to cope in new ways with evaluation of results in terms of day-to-day living experiences. Number 5, move toward early termination that was planned in the initial contract with the family. And number 6, plan and conduct at least one follow-up or booster shot session. Throughout this process, the crisis worker would actively define the goals of the family crisis session and the means that can be used for goal achievement while energetically focusing on the relevant issues. And the assessments, they said here, assessment. While making an assessment, a crisis worker pays special attention to the initial contact with the family, like what events precipitated the crisis, family interactions and conditions, and the family's perceived needs. With such understanding, crisis workers can more adequately assess risk to the child or children, right? And like in my case, my brother went to school, my older brother went to school with a turtleneck on in the middle of summer, and he had bruises on his face and stuff, and his teacher saw that. She took him to the nurse, because you don't wear a turtleneck in the desert in the middle of the summer. It's just not done. And so she clued in. They took him to the nurse, and he told the nurse that he was afraid to go home after they checked him out because my dad had beaten him up. And he was afraid to go home. See, so they got the police involved, and then they got the Child Protection Services involved. And that's what happened in our case, you know. And then they came into the home, and they just assessed that my parents needed counseling, and they didn't, you know, obviously we fell through the cracks because they did not remove us from the home, and really they should have. My mom went to court and pleaded and begged, you know, that the judge would allow her to keep her children and my dad, right? And the judge said, this is what I heard, that the judge said that, you know, as long as they went to family counseling and got their own marriage counseling, and then we would be allowed to stay in the home. So I think that was just a bad move. But see, those people were snowed by my parents. My parents were manipulative. My dad is still very manipulative. He's borderline schizophrenic. He knows how to play the game. And my mom was manic depressive, but all she had to do was cry the blues, and the tears would flow, and of course she'd be feeling sorry for her. And but she was a very abusive, very seriously violent woman. She was a raging manic depressive person who would go from laying in bed for 2 or 3 days and not being able to look after herself to getting up and throwing things across the kitchen, beating on people, smashing people on the head with heavy objects. That was kind of her favorite thing to do. And you know, what are you going to do? You know, if people don't see this stuff and they don't clue into it, you know, then children are going to suffer and possibly die at the hands of their caregivers. And my mom actually didn't care if she killed us. You know, she was just like, I don't care if you died because I didn't want you in the first place. But see, the courts just kind of, the judge obviously just didn't feel there was imminent danger, or we would have been removed from the home. It's really unfortunate because we should have been removed from the home. And I totally believe, you know, that if you suspect abuse, you have to report it because you can save a child's life. If you suspect abuse and you don't report it, and that child dies, that child's blood is on your hands for the rest of your entire life, for the very rest of your life. And you know, it should be. You know, it's the law to report abuse. So if you don't, you're actually really breaking the law. We have to protect children. And, you know, we have to stand up and realize if you didn't grow up in an abusive home, you have no idea what it's like to be abused, right? And we're not talking a spanking here. We're talking violent attacks and physical beatings that would be hard enough for an adult to take, let alone a child, a small body, right, of a child. And so, you know, I cannot stress this enough. If you think and suspect abuse, you have to do the right thing and make the phone call. Because if you don't and that child dies, it will be on your hands. And it's a law, you know. So you must do the right thing. Save a child's life, absolutely. So making the initial contact, before making contact with families, crisis workers should not prejudge them, no matter what information is available from other sources. By keeping an open mind, crisis workers may see and hear things never perceived by other helpers and start afresh. The initial contact capitalizes upon the family member's search for answers to the crisis. An intervention must occur before the family members find rigid, maladaptive ways to defend themselves against the outside world. At this point, they are ready to receive open-minded, honest, trustworthy crisis workers. And see, my parents were, they were abusive when their marriage first started out. So the abuse had been towards each other had been going on for a long time. My mom said even towards the children when she was, first married and they had kids right away. They started having a bunch of kids. And my mom would talk about the things that my dad would do to her and the children. Of course, she was probably telling me that so that I would go against my dad because she was always trying to make it look like it was all of our dad's fault. Of course, I knew different because I was being abused by her. But she was always trying to make it look like it was all his doing, and he was the one who was the major abuser, right? But I think that she was very much involved in that as well because she was with me, so why would things have changed, right? I believe that. My brothers never really, my older brothers and stuff don't talk about too much about what happened to them. They're not around anyway because they're all gone. But the thing is when they were around, they didn't talk too much about the way they were treated as children. So I don't know, but all I know is what I saw. So I can only detail what I actually saw, and it wasn't good. And that's after I came along, and that was 20 years into their marriage. I came along. And they were already fighting for 20 years and being abusive towards each other for 20 years and the children. So the older siblings had already moved out when I was born. And there was still quite a few of us at home. There were still 5 of us at home, but 2 had moved out. And the abuse just continued on and continued on. My parents just continued to be abusive for in their whole marriage, 40, 50 years of marriage. They should have split up. They should have done something. I mean, it was their responsibility, right? It's always the adult's responsibility and never the child's. How can a child be responsible for that kind of stuff, right? It's the parents' responsibility to make sure that they're not abusing their children. But when you have a father who's manic, my dad is borderline schizophrenic, and maybe a little depressed too, but not so much depressed, but just more schizophrenic. And my mom was actually not borderline, but she was diagnosed as manic depressive. So when you have 2 people who have mental problems, then you got problems. So it's so important that if you know someone who has children who has mental problems, you want to keep a special eye on those kids. You really do, because those people are very manipulative. My parents had the neighbors siding with them. Right, the neighbors really felt sorry for my parents because my mom would cry the blues. Oh, life is so tough. We have all these rotten kids, and we'd look at us. We're going to lose our stuff because my parents had to go bankrupt, and they came and took all our furniture, and they took everything, right? And then the neighbors felt sorry for my parents, and they gave us all this stuff, and but they never ever questioned the abuse in the home. And they never questioned, they never thought to themselves, gee, those 2 people fight a lot. I wonder how those kids are making out. Because it was 5 of us living in the home, and all the older siblings were doing drugs, and I was crying all the time. And people would say, look, she's always crying. Somebody should smack her, right? So then I would be beaten for crying, but the whole thing is I was crying because I was beaten before they even came over. So the thing is for all those people out there that might hear this show eventually that were there and know what was going on, good for you for making a good judgment call there. So, it's just they have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. I have to pay attention. If we see a child and we know that these children are being brought up by people who have mental issues and who are stressed out, high-strung, using drugs, just abusive towards each other as far as the parents go, watch out what's going on with those kids. We have to know the signs and symptoms, really, of abuse, know what to look for, especially for emotional abuse, because you can't see emotional abuse, but you can, but it's subtle. So you're not going to see bruises and stuff with emotional abuse or welts or marks. You're going to see all kinds of different behaviors from these children, like, aggressiveness or passiveness, right? All kinds of different things come into play with emotional abuse. So you want to get educated on the signs and symptoms of all the different kinds of abuse, sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. That's a huge one because sometimes you don't see the signs, but, if a child's being molested or whatever, but the signs are there. but you have to know what to look for. So you want to get that information. You can get that at Dreamcatchers for Abused Children on their website. They have a free PDF download called the Child Abuse Handbook, and written by the CEO and founder, that's Sandra Dawn Potter, and also best-selling author and president of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, Donna Shear. They co-wrote that book together. It's called The Child Abuse Handbook. It's a free PDF download. You can get it at www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com or .org. Either one will get you there. And you can pull that up, download that Child Abuse Handbook, and get all the signs and symptoms of all the different kinds of abuse. And really, you should learn those and be really aware of them. And also, there's how to report child abuse, the proper way. If a child comes to you and tells you, I'm being abused, what are you going to do? Well, there's a way to report it, because if you don't report it properly and you don't record what the child says properly, you can ruin a case for that child, and they can end up back in the home and killed and murdered at the hands of their parents. So that's why or the caregivers, so important that we know how to report child abuse. And then so important that we know that we must, by law, report child abuse. If you suspect abuse, do the right thing, make the phone call. We could save a child's life, right? And it's just so important. So they said here, Kinney, Hapala, and Gast, experienced crisis workers, suggest the following approach during the initial contact. We find it, this is what these Kinney, Hapala, and Gast have said, we find it most helpful to plunge right into each client's version of his or her family's problems. Clients become motivated if we follow their agenda. They have the best knowledge of the situation and of constraints that should be considered in proposing treatment options, and clients can help organize the information to suit their experience instead of relying on the therapist to organize information to fit his or her idea of their experience. They give enormous amounts of information when they are really hurting. Well, you hope so. I think my mom probably gave a whole lot of information on how bad my dad was treating her, and my dad probably gave a lot of information on how bad she was treating him. Neither one wanted to admit that they were abusing the children, and that's just the whole thing. They got to be really trained to know that people are they're malicious and they're manipulative. Abusers are very manipulative. How do you think they get away with it for so long, right? So they really know how to manipulate people and steer people to think like they do. So you would hope that crisis workers going into the homes would know this and not really side with the abusers. You don't want to side with the abusers. I mean, I just can't. Society really always wants to side and feel sorry for the abusers and the domestic violence victims, which can be men as well. Men, women, and then of course child abuse victims and survivors' children. Society doesn't want to side with them, and I think it's because they don't want to try to deal with that pain, right? That those people are going through. It's easier just to feel kind of some sort of empathy or sympathy towards an abuser. I don't know what's wrong with society, but it's so true. And you see that with, for instance, child sexual predators. They need all this protection. Well, what about the kids? Child sexual predators, as far as I'm concerned, don't need protection. They need to stop what they're doing. And, what's wrong? Why are we protecting them when we should be protecting the children? I don't understand that. You know what I mean? Like, they should have just the normal protection that every citizen has, which is just normal police protection. But why should they be looked after any different? More protection for them. There should be more protection for the children. You know what I mean? Against these child sexual predators. Society really has to change the way that they feel about abuse. You need to become educated. You need to become aware of the different, aspects and issues surrounding abuse, and especially child abuse. And you need to actually, get involved with whatever group is in your community who's doing some good work, right? And help them out, support them, and get that thing going. It's so important, right? We have about a minute left, and we'll continue this on tomorrow morning, same time, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. And we're going to look at identifying the precipitating event, which is like the first, what actually happened to get CPS involved, which would be a report of abuse, right? Observing family interactions and conditions, determining family needs. So we're going to look at that tomorrow. And I just hope you have a great day. Thanks so much for tuning in. And like I said, I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. Please check out their website. April is the National Child Abuse Awareness Month in the United States and other places. And, Dreamcatchers for Abused Children works 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to stop child abuse. It's a volunteer organization, 501c3, not-for-profit organization out here trying to make some noise to stop child abuse. Join us if you can. Tuesday nights we have Dreamcatchers Talk Radio on blogtalkradio.com, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. Please get involved where you can. You know, you really need to get involved and raise your voice too. Whether you were abused as a child or not makes no difference, you know. And you just, do what you can. Look around, see who's in your world that needs help, and especially if there's children in your world, make sure that you're looking out for them. And everybody have a great day. Take care. All the best until tomorrow. Bye-bye.